Hello and welcome to all you lovely stitchers, particularly Jennifer Clifford from New Zealand, who is up very early as always. We have a double session tonight, as you know, so if you are one of our quilt makers, it is garment making and quilt making questions all on the same evening, all morning, if you are Jennifer. So I hope you are all really well. We've got some good questions coming. Peter is standing by, itching to draw out the two numbers for our prize winners. David is here ready to welcome you. So let me pass you over to David. And then once he's welcomed you, you can find out the exciting little gifts that we have for you today.
Hi everybody, I'm not sure where to look now, I'm looking here. Hi everybody, yes Jennifer, congratulations, you were as usual doing up very early in the morning. Jacqueline Peters next from Hertfordshire. Linda Moore, I think you've got a question tonight, haven't you Linda? Debbie Bolton, Deborina, Leonie Neera, Kathy Hiscock. Who else have we got? Sarah Runicles, you've got a question tonight. Anne Rodriguez, I'm just looking down. Lots of people. Hopefully you can hear us. We've got everything switched on and we're ready to go and start answering some questions.
So Peter, come and say hello to everybody. So we've had a really busy week and a busy few days. We always have a busy time. I'm sure you're exactly the same yourself. But we have been, where have we been, Peter?
We've been to exotic Warrington to see the bolt of lightning sculpture that now regales that fair town.
Yeah, but people have no idea what that is.
Yeah, we've explained about it before. And then we've also just been to Rochdale to see the magnificently restored town hall.
So just in case you don't know what that is, Peter's just had, after 4 years in the making, a sculpture installed just off the M62, which is a big motorway that connects the east and the west of England in the north, and it's just off junction 8 near a place called Warrington. Now this is huge. It is really visible from the motorway, so it's not on the motorway, it's off the motorway on a roundabout, but it's visible from the motorway. But it's lit up at night, so we arrived yesterday in Warrington. We had to see it in the daylight, and then we had to go back in the evening to see it lit up at night. And I did say to Rita, I'm not going to see it at dawn in the morning. But yeah,
missed the treat there.
Yeah. It is very impressive. Yeah. And then it's kind of on the way home, but Rochdale is it's a working class northern town really, but it had a lot of money in the Victorian era, which was based on textiles, and it was kind of between the Yorkshire textile towns and the cotton towns of Lancashire. So it built its money on textiles, but apparently also traded in linen and in silk as well. And their town hall had a multi-million-pound refurbishment and was reopened last year after all this money's been spent on it. And if you are in the area,
25 million.
Yeah, 25 million. It is free to visit and really, really well worth it. And I can also recommend the restaurant as well. So we've had an exciting time, but mostly seeing Peter's sculpture. So
I've got a picture.
Oh, well done.
Let's see. I think that's an artist's impression.
Yes, I think it is. Yeah, but that's exactly what it looks like, really.
I missed a trick there. Sorry,
right.
We're getting teed up.
Right. But Rochdale also home of the Cooperative Society.
Yeah, so the co-op was a workers' association to supply food and other goods at reasonable prices without the middleman, and really set up in Rochdale again in the Victorian era. And I had a great aunt who worked for the Cooperative Society, and I've still got a little pin holder which says the co-op on it, and also a little tea caddy spoon for spooning out your tea. But enough of that, because people might want to know what they're going to win.
Right, they might indeed.
So 2 lucky winners. What I have got here are 2 canvas tote bags. You just get one, but it's got some really cute Christmas sheep on it, and it says this bag contains projects for Christmas, so absolutely no peeking. So these are just perfectly timely, aren't they? Because end of September, we are starting to think, and even I was thinking about making Christmas gifts the other day, and I bought some yarn thinking, oh yeah, that'd make a really nice Christmas gift. I have an idea. So Peter, we need 2 numbers.
Oh right, yes, yeah.
From the famous number bag.
Yeah.
He's digging deep. He's digging deep.
Now, I was just noticing how my blue and the orange of your dress make nice complementary colours, don't they?
Do we compliment one another, Peter?
Occasionally, yeah. Yeah. Let's not go into that.
Yeah. Okay. So Peter's going to pass those numbers to David, and he will match those two winners, and we'll let you know at the end who's won those lovely Christmas project bags, which I'm sure will be really useful. So we can begin with our first question, which is a trouser question. I'm just going to apologise. Oh, we're not doing that one first.
We're doing quilting first.
Oh, I thought we were garments first.
Right, sorry.
Well, I haven't looked at any of those questions, so I'm not set up for that at all. So that's really good, isn't it? Right, swapping
so
over.
I will read the question, and that will.
But those were my gifts for my garment makers.
For the garment makers.
Yeah. So,
okay.
Well.
Okay, we're going to come to me. Philippa's going to gather her thoughts.
I'm here. I'm ready.
Apologies for that. This has all come together very quickly today. So we will get ourselves sorted. So those gifts are not for quilters. Those gifts are for garment makers.
They stay with you.
Okay,
absolutely.
so those are the quilting gifts. Good. Okay. So we've decided where we're at on the gifts. We're now going to look at the first question, and the first question is from Linda Moore. And Linda says, I'm struggling with making a good job of the turned applique for the said shape. Could you give me some tips on the snipping required around these shapes, please? And we've got an image that goes with this. I've still got the, let me tee up the right image, otherwise it will look a lot like a sculpture of an aircraft. So let me come back to Philippa, and I will sort out the image.
So it is a question on turned edge applique, and we do have quite a number of applique classes in both series 1 and 2 which investigate different types of applique or applique depending on where you come from. And I do say that I think that shape dictates the method of applique that you use. And so what Linda is doing is she's got quite a complex kind of floral, it's a bit like a stylized flower shape with multiple kind of wavy petals around the edge, which she wants to do by turned edge. So I have to say to you, Linda, that it isn't that you can't do this by turned edge, but it isn't the best method for the shape. Most of the turned edge applique that I do, and in the class we investigate this, so we look at circles, we look at rounded shapes like petals, just individual petals and leaves. We do look at a heart where you have to cut down into the middle of a heart and you have a very sharp point at the lower edge. And then of course there's a little bird shape that is on the bird by bird quilt. But once you have fused your piece of interfacing onto the wrong side of your fabric, if we could just go back to the picture please, David. What you have got there, as you can see, are quite a lot of different grain lines when you look at the placement of those actual curvy shapes. And so wherever you've got somewhere where you need to snip like the top of a heart, or where these individual kind of shapes go, where you've got to snip right down into the entire depth of the seam allowance, it's very difficult to get that to turn without fraying. So it is possible. Now that I would say to you that your seam allowance is looks a little bit on the wide side, and it looks a little bit, it might just be the picture, it might be very even, but you need to have your seam allowance, I would say a scant 1/4 of an inch. It needs to be even all the way around. And on the outer curve, so on the kind of convex side of the curve, you need to be snipping out little V's as if you're taking out little darts. And all this is really highlighted in the turned edge applique class. But where each individual little indentation is, you've got to snip right down to the point where the interfacing hits the fabric. So I would try it, but I'm going to suggest to you that an alternative method for this shape that would work better with this shape is fused, where you use either blanket stitch or free motion or satin stitch, something like that, because I personally think that is quite hard work. So it's not really what you want to hear, Linda, but revisit both the turned edge and the raw edge applique classes. Have another look at what I say and the methods, and just have another try with an alternative method.
Okay, thank you. So if Philippa says it's going to be tricky, then we know it is definitely going to be tricky to make that look good. Okay, the next question is from Patricia Jenkins, and Patricia has a question about steamer seam. And she says she's doing a table runner with snowmen on it, so we're heavy into the Christmas theme now, aren't we? She's doing a table runner with snowmen on it, using the steamer seam, where at some points there are 4 different layers. She says she's having to clean the needle every few inches and replace it every couple of hours. She says she's using a 70 Microtex needle on a Janome machine. She's just purchased the non-stick needles, but she hasn't tried them yet. She's replacing the needle every few hours, as at that point it begins to skip stitches, and replacing the needle seems to sort it out. She's also tried to use different brands of thread, as some of the threads are starting to break. She's doing a satin stitch around the snowmen. We haven't got a picture of this, unfortunately, but you've given us a reasonable description there, Patricia. Do you have any suggestions, Philippa? She says she's only completed about half the snowmen and have a few other projects planned for using steamer seam. So if Philippa, if you can help. She says also, does this need extra cleaning in the machine? She does the lint cleaning regularly and has the machine serviced, so she's doing all the things that you tell her to do, Philippa. But she's just wondering what else she needs to do. So can you help Patricia out for us, please, Philippa?
So Patricia, I am very impressed that you are so far in advance of getting this project done for Christmas, but you are depriving us of a photo, because I'm sure it's absolutely delightful project that you are doing. Now then, without actually seeing it, it is a little tricky to know kind of what the layering is, but it sounds to me like 4 layers of steamer seam with the associated 4 layers of fabric that steamer seam is applied to, plus the background fabric, is a heck of a lot of thickness there. If you go to, it's going to be a lot of applique questions this evening, if you have another look at our raw edge applique class, one of the things that I explain in the class is that you don't need to steamer seam the entire shape. So steamer seam fusible, it's the fusible membrane that fuses your motif fabric onto your background. And before you apply the steamer seam to the wrong side of your motif fabric, you can cut away the middle of the steamer seam so that you only really have a band of the steamer seam product and the area where you are going to be doing your machine stitching. So let's say you had, I don't know, the body of a snowman, and let's say he had a different fabric for his tummy, just for sake of argument. You could cut away the steamer seam from the central section of the body, and then you could do the same on the tummy section, and then you wouldn't have those multiple thick layers of steamer seam. So I know you're kind of halfway down the project now, but look at where you can get rid of steamer seam so that you are not building layer upon layer upon layer. And as I say, that is outlined in the raw edge applique class. But having done that, yeah, so there are, as Patricia's just found out, or has probably known for a while, that there are non-stick needles which are designed and made to deliberately reduce the build-up of the adhesive gum on the needle. And any of you that have used any of these type of products know that you kind of get a ring of kind of sticky adhesive around the needle. What I tend to do is I tend to take the needle out of the sewing machine, and I tend to just clean the gunky stuff off, and usually I just wipe it away, but a little bit of rubbing alcohol will help to break down that kind of, it'll act as a solvent and clean the needle. So that is one issue. But what I wonder is if it is the thickness of the layers, the number of layers that you are sewing through, and they're quite hard layers, aren't they? You know, once you've got all that adhesive product in there, that is what is blunting the needle. So maybe not so much the adhesive quality of the steamer seam that's causing the blunting, but maybe the kind of the heaviness of it all with all those layers that you are going through. So I wonder if that is what the problem with the needle. And so your needle is working really hard, it's kind of doing a lot more fighting to get through the fabric than it would be doing if you were just sewing 2 plies of fabric together, which is what we do normally. And so it may be that that wear on the needle is also causing the problem with the actual thread breaking as well. And and you will find that some threads will work better than others because they are simply stronger. You don't actually say what thread you are using, but I would probably be using a shiny polyester. Polyester obviously is stronger than cotton. So I think reducing the amount of steamer seam and wherever possible only having it at the edge of the motif and not all the way through is going to help to help with all of those other problems, because I think it's a build-up of things that are happening. So so any more that you've got to cut out, reduce as much of the steamer seam as you can. Clean your needle often, wiping it or a little bit of rubbing alcohol. Don't stitch really fast, because the faster you stitch, the hotter the needle gets, the more the adhesive product will kind of stick to it. So slow, careful, deliberate sewing does help to reduce that. And then polyester threads, I mean, again, you're just going to have to try and see what works best for you, but a polyester thread will be stronger and help with the thickness of all that than a cotton thread. I don't know whether you're already using polyester, but those are things that I think that you need to look at in order to make the whole thing easier, more enjoyable, and to get it ready for Christmas time, because you don't want to be still stitching it on the 24th of December, do you?
There we go, lots of ideas there. Thank you, Philippa. Okay, a couple of comments. Ali P says she loves your earrings, Philippa.
Oh, thank you.
And now I have to say hello to Lynn Fitzpatrick, because I love where she lives. She says hello from Oconomowoc, which I've never heard of before, but I just love that name. So I had to look it up on maps to see where it is, and it's just above Chicago. Well, it's near Milwaukee in Chicago, in Wisconsin. So hi, Lynn. So the next question is from Pamela Brockwell. And she says, I have a question regarding quilts entered into quilt shows. So we haven't had this question before. Are you allowed to change a quilt once you've entered it into a quilt show? Now, Pamela, doesn't mean after it's been entered to go in and sew more bits on it before it actually gets to the judging time. I think what she means is once it's been in one show, and if you're not really happy with the binding when you look at it in the show, can you then redo the binding and then enter it into a different show with some additional work done on it? And Pamela's just saying she doesn't know if there are rules about that or not. Is it fixed for all time once you've entered it into a show, or can you change it after the event? What do we think, Philippa?
Okay. So I think there's a story behind this, Pamela, that we don't know, isn't there? Because maybe you entered it into a show and you had some judges' comments that said something about the binding, and you had another look at it and thought, oh yeah, maybe I could make that a little bit better. If you're watching, maybe if there is a story, we'd quite like to hear it. We always want all the background, we want all the juice, on all of this. So what I would say to you is it very much depends on the show and what you've actually been asked to do. So for example, you might have had to send some kind of digital image in order to have the quilt juried into the show, and if you've submitted an image with one binding and it has been accepted into the show, and you then go and change the binding, then I would suggest that perhaps you shouldn't be doing that, and that the thing to do might be, if you were worried, to get in touch with the show organisers. I mean, I don't know how every show is different, and whether they kind of check what you've sent in against the image that you originally sent off, I don't know. So if you've already sent an image off and it's been accepted with the first binding, then I think maybe you have to stick to it. But if you haven't sent an image off, or it doesn't need an image to be juried into the show, you just send it off, or you haven't yet done so and you're going to change the binding, then I think that is perfectly acceptable. So I think it very much is on a case-by-case basis, and where you are in the process so far. So it is possible that you may be able to do that, and then it might be advisable not to do that. So I would leave that with you, and you will make the best decision knowing more information than we do.
Okay, thank you. Hopefully that gives you enough to go on there, Pamela. Okay, the next question is from Maureen Dahl, and it's a half quilting and half dressmaking question. So we might even ask this again in the next session and see if we get the same answer from Philippa. She says, Philippa, you've taught us to cut our fabric with rulers and a rotary cutter. I'm wondering if you've ever used mechanical cutters, i.e. things like Applique for any of your quilts. And then there's a supplementary question. She says, I notice on the Great British Sewing Bee that they often cut out their fabric with a rotary cutter. Do you use a rotary cutter for garments, and is it reliable? So Philippa, what do we think? Okay,
so I think there is no one size fits all, and that really there are lots of different ways of cutting out, rotary cutters, scissors, and then tools like the Applique. I don't actually have any of those types of things. I have rotary cutters and I have scissors. I am very kind of old school. I love the motion of cutting out with scissors. I mean, I have the most amazing selection of scissors to choose from, and I enjoy using them all on different scissors for different jobs, really. And my quilts, when if I ever get back to making quilts, my quilts tend to be one off, and they don't often have repeated shapes of the same size. If it's curved piecing, each individual piece will only fit in its particular space in the quilt, so that type of tool isn't really applicable for the sort of work that I do. But I mean, I wouldn't ever say don't use it. I think that if people that maybe have a bit of arthritis, or they're doing a lot of shapes where the same thing is being cut out repeatedly, then they really do have their value. So for me, it doesn't really work with the type of work that I do, and I also really like that kind of old school process of just working through it with kind of more traditional tools. And then regarding garment making, I love the process of cutting with shears. I love that whole kind of just the action and the sound and the fabric as you cut through it and as it falls away. So I do mostly use very large dressmaking shears when I'm doing garment making. However, we do have a class called gowns and wraps where we're working with slippery fabrics like silk and slippery polyesters, and in that kind of situation I do suggest that using a rotary cutter can be really helpful to you, because those types of fabrics are so movable and floaty that even just the action of carefully cutting with scissors lifts them off the surface of the table, and the shape can kind of get slightly distorted. So if you're using a rotary cutter and a ruler, or without a ruler indeed, in that kind of situation, and they're very fine fabrics so they cut through easily, then a rotary cutter often is your best choice, because you're not distorting the work as you are cutting it out. So I think it's very much a case of kind of what you're actually doing and what works for you as an individual. I think that in the case of the sewing bee, one of the advantages of using a rotary cutter is that they're working very quickly, and they've got to kind of get this stuff out and together in a very limited space of time for the actual show, and so rotary cutter does speed things up. As you know, I'm not about speed, am I? I'm about kind of accuracy and enjoying the whole process. So whatever works, Diane, and I think the more things you try and the more you do, the more you know what works for you. And I would always, myself included, try to be open to different ideas and different ways of doing things, and not getting sort of set in stone with it. So yeah, it's all good, Maureen.
Okay, thank you. So the next question is from Jenny Murphy-Jones, and Jenny hasn't given us a lot of information to go on. She says, I saw some black universal, and I think these are needles. They were labelled as universal super. Can I use them for free motion quilting? Now, I did get a picture here that I did find an image, so we can see it says black super universal there, which I assume is what we're talking about. Philippa, can we use these for FMQ?
I have never come across these needles. This is absolutely totally new to me.
It looks like they're Schmetz, doesn't it?
Yeah, they are Schmetz. So I know the brand, and the Schmetz produce a huge range of all kinds of different needles. So I'm going to just chat a little bit more, but I'm going to put this out there. Has anybody used them and what did they think of them is the first thing that I am going to say. I mean, I imagine, and I'm just imagining this, why would you have these needles as opposed to ordinary needles? There must be something about that coating that is supposed to make them last longer or something like that. There's some reason for that.
It says it's got a reinforced blade and an extra large eye and a slightly rounded point and an anti-adhesive coating.
Okay, so I mean, slightly rounded is usually for knitted fabric. So would you want that for your woven? Don't know. I particularly don't think you would, but anyway. So anti-stick. I mean, that might be helpful with the question earlier on the steamer seam gumming up the needle. But there are specific needles for reducing that gumming up. So. As in a lot of these cases, yes, you know, some of these things are really useful. Like a ballpoint needle, when that came out for jersey fabrics, was a revelation because it didn't pierce the thread and it stopped ladders and things happening. But I mean, what you have to bear in mind is that all the time companies want your money, you know, that's what they're trying to make you buy their stuff. So yes, it might be better, but it might not be any better than a universal needle. So I think, as with all of these things, you have to try it to know. Now, normally a larger eye is for things like embroidery threads and threads that are tricky, maybe got a bit of kind of sheen to them, metallic, that kind of thing, because the larger eye is supposed to reduce friction when the thread is actually moving through the sewing machine and help to stop shredding and that kind of thing. So, you know, there may be an application there, but is it any better than an embroidery needle? So what I think you have to do is try it to know. And what I always do with these things is that I will try the needle and then I will and I'll do quite a reasonable amount of sewing to give it a kind of good enough length of time to really work out, you know, how is this performing, what do I think of it, and then I would change back to the needle that I would normally be using. So for me it might be the Microtex needle, you know, same size, and I would try the Microtex needle and I would just see what I thought of it. For me, I like tightly woven fabric. The finer the needle, the more easily it penetrates, the less needle damage there is, the less flagging, that pushing and pulling of the work as it goes through the sewing machine, which creates better tension and nicer stitch formation. So you've got to work out what you're doing, what this needle is supposed to be offering you, and whether it is any better than what you are currently using with the thread and the fabric that you are using. So you got to suck it and see, really. And David, any comments? Has anybody tried them?
Yes, Maren Rentz has put a comment, and she said she's used a variety of needles for free motion quilting. They all worked, but with the bigger eye it makes bigger holes, which is problematic if you have dense fabric. So that's the only comment that's come in so far. Right.
Okay. So yeah. So try it, and you know, if they are no better than what you're already using and they're more expensive, why would you spend the extra money for no real advantage? I think the most important thing really is to. I mean, I buy needles in a box of 100. Is to change them relatively often, more often than you might be inclined to. Throw them away, don't put them back in the packet. The thing that is going to give you the best results is the correct size needle for the thread and the fabric that you are using, and changing the needle relatively often. And it's supposed to be after every 8 hours of sewing, which is a lot. And then throw them away, put them in your sharps jar, and for me that seems to work best. So hopefully a bit of help there.
Thank you, Philippa. Hopefully that gives you some ideas there. That was Jenny. Okay, the next question is from Sandy. Sandy Sakura went, and we have an image which goes with this one. This is Sandy's daisy quilt, and she notices that some of the white petals are not flat. She's pressed and starched them, and she's sure it has something to do with the stitching, but she can't quite work out what it is. Philippa, have you got any ideas about what might be going wrong and how she could get those petals flat?
Sandy, you are always so keen to get everything absolutely perfect, aren't you? I kind of feel that in some cases you kind of almost look for problems where there really aren't any problems. I mean, first of all, it does look really lovely. It is really pretty. I can see you've got a bit of wrinkling. If we look at the image and we look at the strip that you've got on the right hand side, the first full one or the second one up from the bottom, there's a little bit of wrinkling going on there, whereas the one above it does seem to be smoother. My suggestion, I mean, what do we think on this? I don't actually know how that how you cut the pieces for this, whether you're cutting strips or whether you're cutting more kind of finished pieces, but I would suggest it might be more to do with slight variations in cutting and kind of easing things in. I mean, things could have changed between one block and the other. You know, you might have altered your tension, you might have changed your thread, so there might have been kind of technical reasons why that has happened, but it almost looks like a kind of easing thing, and it almost looks like a sort of pressing thing as well. And I just wonder whether the work surface or the surface that you are pressing onto is a little bit spongy, and that it is that it's not giving you a crisp finish. It could be that the really smooth ones are cut perfectly on grain and kind of are running parallel to the grain, and it could be that the ones that are a little bit wrinkly are maybe slightly off grain, so you've got a slight bias there, which is allowing a little bit of movement in that stitching. But I don't think that you need to worry about it too much. What happens with these little wrinkly bits is that once you get the wadding, the batting behind there, it does kind of fill up that space. You know, that's what it's designed to do. And once you get your quilting stitching on there, it will be much less noticeable than it is now. So have a look at your cutting, have a look at the strips, see if they are, you know, perfectly on the straight grain, whether you've got a little bit of bias going on there. Again, I don't know how the actual sections are cut, but is there a slight variation in the length of those pieces? Have you been kind of easing them in a little bit? Have you altered needles, threads, pressure on your presser foot, any of those things? Has something changed? And then press on a firm surface. Those are as many things as I can think about at the moment. I would be very interested to know if any of those things do help you resolve this minor problem.
Okay, Sandy. Thank you for that, Philippa. Now, the next question is from Alison Ayres, and Alison says that she has recently discovered a technique called Quilt as you go, and she wonders what are your thoughts on this, Philippa. Are there any good points or bad points to doing this technique? She can't remember whether you've mentioned it in any of the classes. I don't think we've done a question on it for a little while. We have done some questions in the past, but she wondered whether you've ever done a quilt as you go. So what do we think about that, Philippa?
Okay, I have never done quilt as you go that I can think of, and I'm racking my brains. It's quite a long time since I started quilting. Let me think. It's coming up to 30 years. I made my first quilt in 1996. That's a little bit scary, isn't it? Mind you, some of you will be able to beat me on that one, I am sure. So, quilt as you go, instead of creating the whole quilt top and then sandwiching the entire thing, the backing and the wadding or batting, and the quilt top together, and having one huge thing that you are either going to hand quilt or put through your sewing machine, you make up in sections and then join together. I mean, the big advantage of doing quilt as you go is that you are working with much more manageable size pieces of quilt instead of a huge quilt. So let's say you're making a king size quilt, you know, and just had a regular domestic sewing machine. That is an awful lot of fabric and stuff to get through your sewing machine. Whereas if you do quilt as you go, you're working on smaller panels, it's much easier, it's less taxing physically, just in terms of kind of the amount of work that you see in front of you. If you break it down into smaller sections, it just can seem more doable, even if in the end it's actually a little bit more work, because you are joining pieces together and you have to put little strips of binding over sections to cover up raw edges, or you've got to do handwork, etc. So I again, as in sort of previous things, you know, there is no right or wrong in any of this. It is what works for you as an individual, and it's what works for you with the particular project that you are doing. So if it worked for you, Alison, and you are enjoying it, and that is the main reason for doing any of this, if you are enjoying it, then carry on, you know, just keep investigating and see what suits you and do what makes you happy and give you the results that you are pleased with.
Okay, thank you. Now the next question isn't actually a question, it is a comment, and there's a picture that goes with this one, so I'll put it up. This is Linda Booth's beginner quilt. She says, having been unwell for a lot of the year, my sewing has been put on hold. However, today I've finally finished my first quilt made following the beginner's course. It's not a bit like Philippa's and far from perfect, but I'm pleased with it. Hopefully I will improve with more practice. And Linda says, I've learned so much from Philippa and also enjoy listening to the question and answer sessions. I will miss you when you go. With best wishes to you all. And that's from Linda Booth. And that's a great quilt.
Yeah, Linda, it looks absolutely lovely. It really does. I'm so proud of you. So just all of the things that, you know, I'm looking for. I know this is your first quilt and you're seeing, you know, if you're a member of the Facebook group and you've seen other work, that some of the work is incredibly sophisticated, but those people have been quilting for a long time. Actually, some of them not so long, but they put a huge amount of time and effort in. So I think that you have made a beautiful job of that. And I'm just going to tell you what I think is really lovely with it, is that, you know, you've done a really good job of choosing your fabric. So I know that you've got a limited range of fabrics there and most of them are plain, but you've got a batik in there that all of your other colours have come from. So you've used that focus fabric and absolutely picked out really great choices to go with it. But what's more important than that is that you've got a range of really good tonal value from dark through to light, and that is an incredibly important lesson. And it's the thing that some people who have been quilting for a very long time never really get, that you need the darks, the mediums and the lights to make the quilt really sparkle. Lots of people continue to work in a mid-tonal range, which is great for some things, but if you want drama, you need that really, really good range of colours. All your squares look incredibly square. The shape of the quilt is great. I cannot see any wavy edges, and your corners look absolutely spot on. There is no kind of curving or sticking out dog ears or anything like that. So it's really, really accomplished first quilt. You should be extremely proud and know that you are going to go on to even better things, because you've done a magical start there. You've really tried hard, you've really listened, and you've really put it all into practice. So very well done.
Good. Well, then, interestingly, the next question, Kathy Simons has obviously been listening to you talking about darks and mediums and lights, because she says, I recently visited London and just had to visit Liberty London, which is definitely a stop if you're in London. After swooning in the fabric department, she says she purchased 6.5 metres of their gorgeous cotton lawn fabric, and she says 2 darks, 2 mediums and 2 lights. So there's a big tick there and a big smile from Philippa when she hears that. How would you go about choosing a pattern for this delicious fabric?
Okie dokie. So what I would say to you is you have got 3 meters of fabric, and what you will find is that you can very quickly use up those 3 meters of fabric, 6 different pieces. The Liberty prints tend to be fairly small scale, okay, and I would imagine that that's what you've got, and they tend to be based towards florals. I mean, we don't know, we haven't got a picture of them, but I would tend not to do really tiny pieces and not to do really large pieces. I would sort of choose medium-sized pieces, and my first starting point would be to go on the internet and I would just Google and I would just put in Liberty print quilt, and then I would just click on images and see what came up, you know, see what other people had done with it. And what we don't know is, you know, what your level of quilting experience is, and what the kind of work is that you like to do, whether it's piecing, whether it's applique, whether you like to do modern or traditional. So there's a lot of questions there that are that are tricky for me to kind of point you in the right direction, because I don't know what your experience and what your personal preference is and what your taste is. So I would just start doing a lot of research online, and presumably you've got quilting books, and it's a really good look through quilting books and magazines, and you already know what you really like. And also, what are you going to do with this? Is it going to be a small lap quilt? Is it going to be something that goes on the end of a bed? I mean, there isn't enough there to make a big bed quilt, Do you want to do a little quilt, a little table runner that goes on a table in a room that has a chair? So could you do a table runner and a little matching cushion that sits on a chair, and the two complement one another, that kind of thing. So think about, what you like to do, where you hope to put this piece of work, and then start doing some research. And I know that's a bit kind of fobbing you off, but the possibilities are so huge that would be my starting point, is doing some research and looking at images and seeing what appealed to me.
Okay, thank you. Hopefully that helps you out. Kathy gives you at least some starting places. The next question is from Jean Whittle, and Jean has obviously been to the Houston Quilt Festival and taken some classes there with Philippa in the past, because she would like to know, Philippa, when will you return to the Houston Quilt Festival? As she says she misses taking your classes. So what do we think, Philippa?
Well, that's a really lovely thing to hear. Thank you, Jean. That's really kind of you. I taught at the Houston Quilt Show I think I first went in, let me think about this, 2006. Was the first year that I went, and I taught every year up until COVID, so from 2006 to 2019. Then I had a year off there was no show in 2020. I did go back in 2021, but I haven't been back since. I don't know what to say about that, really. Because Quilters Question Time and then the garment making classes became kind of all consuming, my actual in-person teaching really stopped, because it was just absolutely impossible to fit it all in, really. I mean, in that sense, since we started Quilters Question Time in 2019, I haven't actually made an exhibition quilt since 2018, because it took over my life. Not really, it did take over my life. And so I missed the people. I absolutely missed the people. But we created a community here, and so I'd still had contact. I didn't have the face-to-face contact, but I still had the contact. But I didn't miss all of the huge amount of preparation, and it isn't just about preparing for all your classes and getting it all in your suitcases and things like that. It was all the kind of the booking the flights, the sending all the supply lists to be printed in the catalogue, all of those. There's this huge amount of work that isn't kind of seen. And we would start teaching on the Monday morning, and I would teach Monday all day, Monday evening. So I'd be starting, they always would give me an 8 o'clock start, so I'd be sort of in the classroom before 7:30 setting up. I would teach all day, and so an early start, and then Monday there was an evening class that finished at 9, so I'd be getting back to my hotel room about 10ish. Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday were just day classes, so I would start at 8 and finish at 5 in terms of the teaching. Friday was like Monday with an evening class, then Saturday was all day classes, and then there were classes on Sunday morning. And when I used to go into the show at lunchtime, and I used to go, I'll have a look round and see if I can do any shopping, blah, blah, blah. And it was such that I would go into the show, and some of you have heard this before, and I would not get further than the first aisle, because people would come up to me and say, "Hello, Philippa, how are you?" And it was really lovely to see everybody. But sometimes I would just go into the bathroom just to stand in the toilet, just to have 5 minutes where I didn't need to speak, because we would share rooms with the teachers in the hotel, because we paid for our own rooms, and so you needed to share rooms to kind of get the cost. And I remember for several years I had a lady who just talked, and I would really say, "I'm going to go to sleep now, you can carry on talking if you like, but you won't get any response to me." Anyway, I used to go into the bathroom, and for those who've not been to the States, the separate stores, there's a gap under the door where you can see people's feet. And I always imagine that because I always try to dress up, don't I, that somebody would see my shoes and go, "Hello, Philippa, how are you?" then so I would come home after all this kind of really intense stuff, and then my husband might pick me up from Manchester Airport, which is 2 to 3 hour drive, and he would say, tell me all about it, and I would say, no, you can talk at me, but I'm not ready to speak yet, because I just couldn't. I just taught myself out. I mean, I used to get on the 10-hour flight back and just like, give me a gin and tonic and don't talk to me. So it's tremendously exciting and interesting and rewarding, but it's also unbelievably exhausting. You just give and you give and you give and you give. And I was just only last week invited to go and teach a symposium in New Zealand, which I have done previously, and I did turn it down. And why did I turn it down? I'm looking after my dad. We got this massive renovation. Quilter's Question Time was just exhausted me. I have nothing. I just feel like I'm giving all the time, and I need some time just to find myself again, and I don't know, just I'd love to make another quilt, but I just know that that's not going to happen for a long time. So I'm not saying to you that I'm never going to go back there. I have no idea what the future holds, but I'm in need of just escaping from the world really for a while, and then we'll see what happens. So I'm sorry that that's not the answer that you want, and I'm not putting an absolute no on it, but for now it's just not the time.
Thank you, Philippa. So there's some insight into what it's like to teach at Houston, exciting and exhausting all at the same time. Okay, the next question is from Liz. And Liz has got a picture. I'm not sure. I think this one. Have I got the right picture? Here we are. That is Liz's picture. So Liz says, I just wanted to say thank you for suggesting that I take the precision piecing class in order to improve my skills and lower my frustration. I finished my block on Saturday, and while I left myself plenty of room to improve, I did a better job of it overall. Trimming the half square triangle was very satisfying. I'm pretty sure I won't ever love flying geese, but I will use your methods. My inconsistent results in the past were a true mix of the 1/4 inch seam consistency, pressing technique, and difference in fabric quality and stretch, I believe. Here's my block to prove persistence is valuable. Thanks again. And that is from Liz in sunny California.
So Liz, what a delightful thing to see and to hear. I mean, your block looks amazing. I can see that you haven't lost any of your points. If we look around the outside edge, you can see you've got 1/4 inch on all of those. So when you sew it onto the next thing, you're not going to chop anything off. You've done an outstanding job of getting that central on point square into the larger triangles. You've got your darks, your medium and your light. I mean, it really sings out. So I mean, we had it was the first, no, it wasn't, it was the second class that we ever filmed. But I just think that it is such a valuable class because it shows you so many different things. There are so many aspects that we talk about, from choosing fabric, rotary cutting, sewing, pressing, so many tips that I'm so pleased that you have found it really useful. And it's just such a brilliant starting point. And once you can create a block of the quality that you have achieved here, then your future work will just improve dramatically. And it's about not rushing through it and paying attention to every step. And I always say this, but it's not about churning the stuff out, is it? It's kind of, in my ideal scenario would be that everybody left that churning stuff out behind for most of the time, and the project became so much more part of you. It took so much longer. It was so much more rewarding in the doing of the project and in the finished thing. And that would really help us stop consuming so much and just really valuing what we are making even more than we already do. So I'm really proud of you. I'm delighted, really. So thank you for sharing that with us.
Sally Smith says precision piecing is her favourite class as well. I think it's a lot of people's favourite. That block was one of the most popular blocks that got sent in with examples, and everybody said my piecing and my half square triangles and everything had never been as good as when they followed the class. So thank you all for your comments on that. Okay, we're coming towards the end of the session. And I haven't got this lady's last name. This is from Anne, and Anne says, during the last session, Philippa, you mentioned placing your quilt flat on the floor to smooth it out prior to pinning the quilt sandwich together. I'm finally close to this part of the process, making my first quilt for our bed, but I don't have a floor space that's big enough to fit the whole quilt on there. How does Philippa recommend approaching this? What do we think?
Yeah, and I think, thank you for your question, Anne. We've had quite a bit of discussion on this over the years, really, and I think Antari had a good method where, what did she do with it? I know that some people use pool noodles and all kinds of things, right? But if it was me and I was in my house and I didn't have the floor, but I had a dining table, and the quilt was too big for the dining table, I would have a kind of look round. I mean, I've got a couple of fold-up little tables stored under the bed which come out when we have large numbers of people for a meal. You know, so have you got a fold-up table that you could put on one end of your dining table, and can you just do a little bit at a time? I think that there is a lot of kind of fear about layering up, really, and I think people think that there's kind of a magic to it and that they've got to stretch it and really smooth it and do all kinds of things. I mean, basically what you are trying to do is just get your 3 layers together under a fairly even tension, and you're going to hold those layers together by whatever method suits you. So whether you are going to pin it or use some kind of spray basting adhesive, or whether you're going to use those little plastic shooting tacks, or whether you're going to hand baste it, whatever. I just think you use whatever you have available to you. You know, when I lived in Saudi Arabia, we just couldn't get stuff, and I always just used to think that it was the best thing to make you be as creative as possible with what you had, and that it wasn't about throwing money at it. So, you know, have you got a dining table? Can you put a little table on the end of it? Can you get you know, have you got some cutting mats? Can you put several cutting mats on the table so that you can pin into them, and that you could start in the center, and then you could pin and do the center, and then you could just work out. I mean, one of the things that I find that I'm often doing, you know, I pin my quilt layers together, is that once I've got them pinned together, I might be at points in the actual quilting process unpinning it, re-smoothing it and pinning it again, and I'll just be doing that kind of, you know, on the floor wherever there's a space, and I won't be spreading the whole thing out, I'll just be spreading a bit of it out. So I think just look around and see what you've got, and don't get too hung up on it. I think it's a slightly different thing, but in terms of the thing where it goes wrong most often is when you've layered your quilt layers up, you get pleating on the back, and you stitch pleats in the back when you're doing in the ditch quilting, or you know, you're setting seams, that kind of thing. And the biggest lesson for me on that was not to do kind of setting the seams and in the ditch quilting to set the layers together before you did any of the other kind of infill quilting, and that wherever I was in the ditching a line or something like that, I didn't do it initially. I only did it when I got to that stage in the quilt stitching, the quilting process. So, you know, I'd start in the middle. So maybe I was, let's just say for example, I was doing a stippling across the middle, and then I wanted a straight line on either side of that stippling, and then I was going to do something else beyond that. I would do my stippling, then I would do my straight line on either side, then I would do my next bit of whatever came on either side of that, and then if it was another straight line, I'd put it in then. And that seemed to me to be the main way of stopping pleats and things happening on the back, and doing that bit of pinning or whatever it is and stitching, and then checking it and realigning it if you need to. So and you know, the other option is, do you have a friend with a big floor? Is there a community room that you can use? You know, could you go to a community space and put lots of tables together and do it on a table so that you're not crouching down on the floor? So just get creative with what's available to me, how can I do this, and just get on and do it, and don't think it's the last time that you're going to put these pieces together. You can adjust and move and come back to it at various stages throughout the quilt stitching process. Hopefully that's a help.
Okay, so Sally Smith says she's been known to beg the use of long tables in the church hall, and that spares having to crawl around on the floor. So certainly we've got a bunch of tables in our church hall that people would be able to. Oh, mind you, you're going to be writing to me asking if you can use them now, so I wish I had said that. But
the Baptist Church in Beverley.
But church halls have very often got tables that you might be able to borrow on a wet Saturday afternoon to do your pinning. Okay, Barbara Jackson's asked just a question about saying, you sent a question in last month. I thought we answered your question last month, Barbara. If we didn't, then my apologies. Send an email to us before. That's much the easiest way to deal with any queries. So hopefully, Barbara, if we didn't deal with it last month, we'll deal with it next month. Okay, the final question then is from Katie Rules, and I don't think I've teed up the picture for this one, so we'll do that now. Here's Katie's picture, and Katie says, Philippa's advice worked great for binding my very old kaleidoscope quilt. I revisited further fabulous finishes, and now I'm in the midst of the final hand stitching. Thank you. So her actual question is, she's experimenting with piping around each block in a small wall hanging, and I think we can see that. So the kaleidoscope quilt is the one on the left, the wall hanging is the one on the right, and we can see in red there, beautifully outlining on the black, the piping. How do you suggest pressing after I add the lattice strips without flattening the piping? Thank you for making me a better quilter. And that's from Katie. So Philippa, you've made her a better quilter. Can you help to make her to be an even better quilter with this piping question?
Right, so well, two things then. I'm really pleased, Katie, to see your quilt with the beautiful binding on that shaped edge, and you look like you've done a fantastic job with it. It looks very consistent and really great choice of fabric. Really finishes off the end with a nice strong finish, but not too wide, is it? So it's just kind of the right balance for the piecing and the colour work that you've got in there. So I think that's absolutely spot on, so well done with that. And then your the new piece that you're working on, it looks outstanding, doesn't it? That red really makes a difference, doesn't it?
It's just amazing.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It looks just so good. And I'm just going to compliment you as well. I mean, I don't know whether this is a pattern, somebody else's design, or whether it's just blocks that you've put together, but you've got a really good balance, and you've got a really good balance of your black and your white in all of those blocks. They're fairly evenly balanced. You've got nothing that is too dominant or too strong that's really pulling your eye, and your arrangement is really good with that. And also your sashing, the width of your sashing really complements that as well. So it's really nicely judged. I think you've done a really excellent job with that. So I imagine what we are seeing here is just the quilt top. That is the question that you are asking. So how I would deal with that is that I would not be placing this kind of flat onto my ironing board. I would be draping it onto the ironing board by degrees. So I might put the top border and maybe half the block onto the ironing board, and then the rest of it would be hanging down, and then I'll be able to get the top of the iron into each of the individual blocks without squashing it. So basically what you've got is half a block am I making sense, David? Half a block, yeah, on the, and then you can get the toe of the iron in there, and you can press that half a block. Now you can be turning it round and manipulating it all the way. So let's say you wanted to, you were on the top row and you wanted to press the sashing that is between the central block and one of the side blocks, then again I would be just positioning it so I had the sashing on the edge of the ironing board. So the sashing is actually on the ironing board, but the little bit of piping is just hanging down the front in front of me, and then I can press the bit that I want to press. I can turn it 180 degrees and do the other way again. So I just think you need to be manipulating it in lots of different ways on your ironing board, and working at it like that. I mean, one of the things I think, and we do teach it, you know, I mean, I always kind of think that, you know, I could get a group of people in a room, you're all going to want me to do this, and we spend just 2 hours learning how to press properly. It does come from tailoring, and it does come from garment making. And, you know, I have a thing with Peter, like, don't touch my laundry, don't do any of my ironing, and he'll come along and he'll say, I've just ironed your pajamas for you because I thought that was safe. And I'm thinking, no, don't. I don't want that crease in the collar of the pajama jacket. I hide it. I've told you before, I hide my ironing. But I think that there's definite skill in pressing and ironing, and I think it takes a long time, and I think a lot of people just see it as a very secondary kind of quick whiz over, blah blah blah. I spend a long time really pressing, make all the difference in the world with the pressing, and that there's this kind of idea, isn't there, often that ironing's bad, and people get very sort of proudly say, oh, I never iron anything. And I just think that you can totally reset your mind on this and see it as sometimes a nice process. You know, yes, a lot of ironing can be incredibly boring, but you know, you could just set yourself aside a little bit of time and you know, iron a couple of things really well, and they're just going to look fantastic, aren't they, when you wear them? So I think there's a whole mindset change often needed on that, and that is certainly in the sewing process, whether it's garment making or quilt making, that the pressing, the ironing is not just a secondary thing, it's an integral part of the job, and doing it really well is as important as doing the sewing really well. So that's what I suggest. Quite a lot of manipulating. I would be working with steam, very firm surface to press onto. I think you'll get really good results with it. So Peter's just come back in perfect time to read out who the two winners are. What are you bringing to show us?
Just the eggs. Just brought in the eggs, that's all.
Oh, just brought in the eggs. So 2 white, 2 brown and 2 blue. Right, so after my initial mistake thinking that I was talking to garment makers, that is coming up in about half an hour or so. So our 2 lucky quilt makers who have won these lovely Christmas project bags,
yes,
are
Christine Simpson and Linda Booth.
So Christine and Linda, I'm sure that you are going to want these lovely bags.
Did you notice, by the way, when we were at Rochdale, how wonderfully long the guide pronounced the double O's? It was all Luke and Book, and it took a long time.
Have you got any kook books? Thank you for that, Peter. So David will message you and get your postal address, and those will be sent off to you. So I do think they are really nice. I do hope that you like them. So for those of you who are joining us for garment making questions, you've got about 25 minutes to go and get whatever you need, cup of tea, glass of wine, whatever it is, and we'll be back with you shortly. But from next month, October, we will be back to our normal Tuesday for our quilt makers and Thursday for our garment makers, and that will be good for me because I won't mess it up, will I? So but anyway, there's always massive crossover. It doesn't matter whether you're a garment maker or a quilt maker, it all applies. There is no kind of isolation to this project. So from all of us here, thank you very much for joining us. Some of you we will see shortly. Some of you we look forward to seeing at the end of October. So from all of us, bye for now. Bye.